The morning air bit like tiny needles against the skin. It was the kind of cold that finds its way through every layer, no matter how thick your coat. Snow fell in lazy spirals, covering the city streets in a blanket of white that crunched underfoot. May hurried along the busy sidewalk, her breath coming out in little clouds that disappeared almost as quickly as they formed. She was running late for her third-grade class. The school principal wouldn't be happy. This was the second time this week the subway had broken down. Clutching her coffee cup with gloved hands, May dodged other commuters, all hunched against the biting December wind. Everyone seemed locked in their own worlds, eyes down, moving quickly to get where they needed to be. That's when she saw her. An older woman sat huddled in the recessed doorway of an abandoned storefront. Her gray hair peeked out from beneath a thin knit hat that offered little protection from the elements. She wore layers of mismatched clothes, all worn and faded with time. But it was her eyes that made May stop in her tracks, bright blue and clear, filled with a quiet dignity despite her circumstances. The woman's hands were red and chapped, rubbing together in a futile attempt to create warmth. She wasn't begging or holding a sign. She simply sat there, trying to shelter from the worst of the wind. May felt a tug in her chest. She was already late, and her students were waiting. The responsible thing would be to hurry on. Maybe drop some change in a cup on the way back. That's what everyone else did. Instead, her fingers moved to the soft cashmere scarf wrapped around her neck, a birthday gift from her sister Lily. The rich blue fabric had been hand-knitted over many evenings, each stitch filled with love and care. "Excuse me," May said, her voice gentle as she approached the doorway. The woman looked up, surprise flickering across her weathered face. People rarely stopped to speak to her. "Would you like this?" May unwrapped the scarf from her own neck, the cold immediately biting at her exposed skin. For a moment, the woman said nothing, her blue eyes studying May's face as if searching for a trick or a catch. Finding only kindness there, she slowly nodded. "That's mighty kind of you, dear," she said, her voice rough but warm, like stones polished smooth by a river. "My name's Rose." "I'm me," she replied, carefully wrapping the soft scarf around Rose's neck. The blue cashmere looked beautiful against her silver hair. "It's not much, but it should help a little." Rose's fingers, stiff with cold, touched the fabric with wonder. "It's the nicest thing I've felt in years," she whispered. Then she looked up at May with a small smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you. Truly." "You're welcome." May smiled back, suddenly not minding that she was now 5 minutes later for class. This moment felt important somehow. As May turned to leave, Rose called after her, "God bless you, child." May waved and continued her journey to school, rubbing her now cold neck but feeling strangely warmer inside. She couldn't have known that Rose watched her until she disappeared around the corner, the blue scarf clutched tightly as if it were made of gold. As May taught her students about multiplication tables that day, she thought briefly about Rose and hoped the scarf was keeping her warm. She wondered about her story, how she ended up on the streets, if she had family somewhere, what her life had been like before. By evening, as May graded papers at her small kitchen table, the morning's encounter had faded from her immediate thoughts. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness had set wheels in motion that would change not only Rose's life, but her own in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. And Rose, sitting in a shelter that night with the blue scarf still wrapped around her neck, was making plans for the first time in years. Few people who passed Rose on the street knew her real story. They saw only what they expected to see, an old homeless woman, another unfortunate soul lost in the cracks of society. They didn't see Eleanor Rose Harrington, once the toast of high society, whose picture had graced charity gala programs and business magazines. In her small corner of the abandoned doorway, wrapped in the soft blue scarf, Rose closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember the life she once had. The sprawling house on the hill with its 27 rooms and gardens that bloomed year-round in the greenhouse. The dinner parties where politicians and business leaders gathered around her table, laughing at her jokes and praising her husband's genius. Thomas Harrington had built his tech company from nothing, working late into the night in their garage, while Rose brought him sandwiches and coffee. When success finally came, it arrived like a tidal wave, fast and overwhelming. Almost overnight, they went from counting pennies to counting millions. "We'll use this money to help people," Thomas had promised her one night as they lay in bed, still stunned by their new wealth. Not just to buy things. And they had. For 30 years, the Harrington Foundation had built schools in poor neighborhoods, funded medical research, and created shelters for those in need. Rose had personally handed out scholarships to hundreds of promising students. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Thomas's heart attack 3 years ago had been the beginning of the end. He died before he could sign the updated will that would have protected her. His children from his first marriage, people Rose had raised as her own, descended like vultures. "Dad would have wanted us to modernize the company," they said, pushing Rose out of board meetings. "We need to cut the charity budget to stay competitive." Her stepson's wife was particularly cruel. "It was never your money anyway," she had whispered to Rose at the funeral. "You were just the lucky girl who married well." The legal battle drained what personal savings Rose had. Then came the accusations of financial mismanagement at the foundation, all fabricated but convincing enough to freeze her remaining assets during investigation. The final blow was finding the locks changed on the house she had called home for 30 years. Too proud to call the few friends who might have helped, too ashamed to approach the charities she once supported, Rose had fallen through society's cracks with shocking speed. 3 years on the streets had taught her harsh lessons about invisibility. People looked through her, past her, around her, anything to avoid acknowledging her existence. But that young woman today, May, had actually seen her, had spoken to her like she was a person worthy of conversation. The scarf around her neck wasn't just warm. It was proof that kindness still existed in the world. Rose's fingers traced the delicate pattern of the knitting as night fell. She had made her way to the women's shelter on 9th Street, one of the few places she felt safe enough to sleep. The volunteers knew her only as Rose, the quiet one. None recognized her as the woman whose donation had built this very shelter a decade ago. From her small cot in the corner, Rose watched the other women prepare for bed, some muttering to themselves, others silent with exhaustion or despair. Once she would have seen them as projects to help. Now she saw them as they truly were, women with stories, dreams, and lives that had taken unfortunate turns. The blue scarf had awakened something in Rose that had been sleeping for a long time, her fighting spirit. As she lay awake listening to the breathing of 20 other forgotten women, she made a decision. This would not be her ending. Somehow, she would reclaim enough of her past to make a difference again. And maybe, just maybe, she would find that kind-hearted teacher who had looked at her and seen a human being worthy of a beautiful scarf. The next morning, Rose sat on a bench in the small park across from Westside Elementary School. She pulled Me's blue scarf tighter around her neck as she watched the stream of teachers arriving for work. The cold bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. She had spent too many nights in freezing doorways to be bothered by a little morning chill. "Looking for someone?" asked a gruff voice beside her. Rose turned to see Carlos, the old security guard who patrolled this area. In another life, she had helped fund his son's college education through one of her foundation's scholarship programs. Carlos didn't recognize her now, with her weathered face and gray hair. Few people did. Just watching, Rose said with a small smile, "It's nice to see normal life happening." Carlos nodded, his kind eyes crinkling. He didn't chase her away like other security guards might. Instead, he pulled out a paper bag from his coat. "Got an extra sandwich today. My wife always packs too much." Rose accepted the offering with genuine gratitude. "Your wife's a good woman." "The best," Carlos agreed before continuing his rounds. Rose ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the school entrance. When Mai hurried up the steps, slightly late again, Rose couldn't help but smile. There was something about that young woman that reminded Rose of herself long ago, before wealth, before status, when all she had was determination and a kind heart. After finishing her sandwich, Rose walked 6 blocks to the public library. The librarians there had grown used to her presence and no longer watched her suspiciously as she used the computers. It was here, in this quiet corner of the world, that Rose still had some power. She logged into an email account known only to a handful of people from her past. There was a message waiting from Frank, her husband's former driver, who had remained loyal even after her fall from grace. "Called in that favor from my cousin at the school district," his message read. "Your teacher's name is May Lin. Been teaching 3rd grade for 4 years." lives in the apartment building on Pine Street, volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends, her mother's sick, cancer treatments eating up all her money. Good person from what everyone says. Never misses a day unless the trains break down. Rose typed a thank you reply and sat back, thinking, Mai Lin. Finally, she had a full name to go with the face that had shown her such unexpected kindness. Over the next few days, Rose became a shadow in Mei's world. Not stalking, Rose was careful to keep her distance, but observing. She watched from across the street as Mei stopped to help an elderly man pick up groceries he dropped. She saw how Mei knelt to comfort a crying child who had fallen on the playground. She noticed how, despite clearly being short on money herself, Mei always dropped $1 in the cup of the musician who played saxophone outside the subway station. On Saturday, Rose found a bench across from Happy Tail's animal shelter. Through the large windows, she could see Mei walking dogs, cleaning cages, and scratching the ears of cats waiting for homes. Even when no one was watching, when no praise would come, Mei showed the same gentle kindness to these abandoned creatures. She's the real deal, Rose murmured to herself, fingers tracing the pattern of the blue scarf. That evening, Rose made her way to a coffee shop in a different part of town. The owner, a woman who had once been Rose's housekeeper, welcomed her warmly and led her to a back table. He's waiting for you, the owner whispered. A man in an expensive suit stood as Rose approached. He was one of the few attorneys who had remained loyal after her downfall. I found him, the attorney said without preamble. The accountant who falsified the records against you. He's willing to talk. Rose's eyes glinted with something that had been missing for years, hope. Good, she said, because I've found someone too. Someone who deserves a better life than the one she has. And I'm going to make sure she gets it. The attorney looked confused. I thought we were focusing on clearing your name. Rose touched the blue scarf gently. We are, but not just for me anymore. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Mei was sorting through the mail in the school office when the secretary called her name. Package for you, she said, pointing to a large brown box on the counter. Came by courier. Must be important. Mei stared at it with surprise. She rarely got packages at work. Thanks, Judy, she said, lifting the box. It was lighter than it looked. Back in her classroom during lunch break, Mei carefully opened the package. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay 20 hand-knitted scarves in various colors, blues, reds, greens, purples, all made from the softest yarn. Each one was unique but crafted with obvious care and skill. Tucked among them was a simple note written in elegant handwriting. For the children who need warmth this winter. From a friend. No signature. No return address. Just 20 beautiful scarves and those few words. Mei ran her fingers over the delicate stitches, wondering who could have sent such a thoughtful gift. As the third-grade teacher at a school where many families struggled to make ends meet, she knew exactly which children would benefit most from these scarves. Miss Lin, what's that? Asked Zach, one of her students who had stayed in for lunch. A gift, Mei explained, from someone with a kind heart. Would you like to help me pick which kids might need these for winter? By the end of the day, Mei had discreetly given out 15 of the scarves to her students who came to school without proper winter gear. The joy on their faces warmed her heart more than any scarf could. That Saturday, Mei arrived at Happy Tail's animal shelter for her regular volunteer shift. She found the staff in an unusual state of excitement. Mei, you won't believe what happened, called Hannah, the shelter manager, her round face flushed with happiness. Someone made an anonymous donation yesterday. 6 months of operational costs, paid in full. What? Who would do that? Mei asked, stunned by the news. Hannah shook her head. No idea. The money came through a lawyer who said his client wished to remain anonymous. The only message was keep doing your good work. As volunteers and staff celebrated around her, Mei felt a strange tingle up her spine. First the scarves, now this. Coincidences happened, of course, but 2 in 1 week felt significant somehow. The third surprise came 5 days later. Mei was at the hospital with her mother, Lin Wei, for her weekly chemotherapy session. The cancer treatments had drained not just her mother's energy, but also Mei's modest savings. She'd been picking up extra tutoring jobs on weekends just to cover the co-pays. Ms. Lin. A hospital administrator approached them in the waiting room, holding a folder. "Could I speak with you and your mother privately?" In a small consultation room, the administrator placed several papers on the table. "I'm pleased to inform you that your mother's medical bills have been paid in full, including all future treatments." Lin Wei gasped. "There must be some mistake. That's impossible." "No mistake," the administrator assured them. "An anonymous benefactor has covered everything. The only requirement is that you continue with all recommended treatments." May felt the room spin slightly. "Who would do this? We don't know anyone with this kind of money." The administrator shrugged. "The payment came through the Harrington Trust. That's all I know." On the bus ride home, Me's mother held her hand tightly. "Someone is watching over us," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "A guardian angel." Me nodded, but her mind was racing. The scarves. The shelter donation. Now her mother's medical bills. All anonymous. All within weeks of each other. That night, May couldn't sleep. She stood by her window, looking out at the city lights, wondering who could possibly be behind these gifts. The only unusual thing she'd done recently was give her favorite scarf to that homeless woman. But that was ridiculous. A homeless woman couldn't be secretly paying hospital bills. Could she? As Mai finally drifted off to sleep across town, Rose sat in a small but clean hotel room, making phone calls and finalizing plans. On the desk before her lay newspaper clippings about the Harrington fortune, legal documents, and a photograph of Mai walking to school. Next to the photograph lay the blue scarf carefully folded. "Almost time," Rose murmured to herself. "Almost time to meet properly." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, heavy cream-colored paper with May's name written in elegant handwriting. The return address showed Goldstein and Associates, attorneys at law. May turned it over in her hands as she stood in her tiny kitchen, wondering what a fancy law firm could possibly want with a third-grade teacher. "Probably just trying to sell me something," she muttered, but her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a formal letter requesting her presence at their downtown office regarding a matter of personal importance. It was scheduled for Thursday at 4 p.m. After school hours. How did they know her schedule? May called the number on the letterhead, half expecting it to be fake. But a professional-sounding receptionist confirmed the appointment was real. No, she couldn't provide more details. Yes, it was very important that May attend. For the next 2 days, May could barely focus on teaching. What could lawyers want with her? Was it something bad? Had she unknowingly done something wrong? Or maybe, her heart leaped at the thought, maybe they had information about her anonymous benefactor. When Thursday finally arrived, May spent extra time choosing her outfit, a simple blue dress she saved for parent-teacher conferences. She wanted to look professional, whatever this meeting was about. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a glass skyscraper downtown. May felt out of place as the elevator whooshed upward, carrying her away from the world of alphabet charts and multiplication tables into something unknown. Ms. Lin greeted the receptionist with a warm smile. "They're ready for you. Please follow me." May was led down a hallway lined with expensive artwork to a heavy wooden door. The receptionist knocked once, then opened it with a nod for May to enter. The conference room was smaller than Mai had expected, with a table that could seat 8 people. But only one person waited inside, an older woman seated at the far end, her back to the door, looking out at the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Ms. Lin has arrived," the receptionist announced. The woman turned, and Mi's breath caught in her throat. Though she was elegantly dressed in a tailored suit, her hair neatly styled, May would have recognized her anywhere. It was Rose, the homeless woman she had given her scarf 2 months ago, and around her neck she still wore that very same blue scarf. "Hello, May," the woman said, standing to greet her. "My real name is Eleanor Rose Harrington. Please, sit down. We have much to discuss." Mi's legs felt weak as she sank into a chair. "I don't understand." "I know," Eleanor said with gentle understanding. "It must be quite a shock." She touched the scarf at her neck. "This was the first gift I had received in years that came with no strings attached. Just pure kindness from a stranger." "The scarves for my students," May whispered as realization dawned. "The donation to the shelter, my mother's medical bills, that was all you." Eleanor nodded. I wanted to help the person who helped me when I needed it most. But how? You were, May couldn't bring herself to say homeless. I was, Eleanor confirmed, for 3 years. Before that, I was one of the wealthiest women in this city. Over the next hour, Eleanor explained everything: her husband's death, her stepchildren's betrayal, the false accusations that had stripped her of her fortune and reputation. But one loyal attorney believed in me, she continued. With your scarf keeping me warm, I found the courage to fight back. We discovered evidence of the fraud, located a whistleblower willing to testify, and managed to recover a portion of what was stolen from me. May listened, wide-eyed. And you used that money to help me and the causes I care about. But why? Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes bright with emotion. Because you saw me, May, not just a homeless woman, but a human being worthy of kindness. Do you know how rare that is? Tears filled May's eyes. I just gave you a scarf. You gave me much more than that, Eleanor replied softly. You gave me hope. And now I'd like to propose something that could change both our lives. May wiped her eyes. What kind of proposal? Eleanor smiled, laying a folder on the table between them. How would you like to help me build something wonderful? Eleanor opened the folder and slid several glossy photographs across the table. They showed an old brick building with boarded-up windows and a faded for sale sign out front. It doesn't look like much now, Eleanor admitted. But with some work, it could be something special. May studied the photos. What is it? Right now, it's nothing. An abandoned community center on Pine Street. Eleanor's eyes lit up with passion. But I see it becoming the headquarters for the Warm Hands, Warm Hearts Foundation. A foundation? May asked, trying to follow along. Eleanor nodded. A foundation dedicated to helping homeless individuals, especially women, get back on their feet. Not just with temporary solutions like shelters, but with job training, healthcare, legal assistance, and housing support. She paused, watching May's reaction. And I want you to run it. May nearly choked. Me? But I'm just a teacher. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. You know more than you think, Eleanor countered gently. You understand kindness. You see people for who they truly are. And you have something many charity directors lack, genuine compassion that doesn't come from guilt or obligation. May shook her head in disbelief. This is overwhelming. I know, Eleanor agreed. And I'm not asking for an answer today. But I can offer you a salary that would allow you to leave teaching and focus entirely on helping others. Your mother's medical care is already taken care of, as you know. May's mind raced with possibilities. She loved teaching, but the chance to help people on a larger scale, to make a real difference in the lives of those society often forgot, was tempting. The first initiative, Eleanor continued, would be a women's center. I'd like to name it after your mother, the Winelands Center for Women. Tears welled in May's eyes. Her mother, who had worked double shifts as a hospital janitor to put May through college, who had never complained even when cancer ravaged her body, who had taught May that kindness mattered above all else, her name would live on in something meaningful. Why? May asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do all this because of a scarf? Eleanor touched the blue fabric at her neck. When you've been invisible to the world, when people cross the street to avoid looking at you, a single moment of human connection becomes priceless. Her voice cracked slightly. Your scarf wasn't just warmth for my neck, it was warmth for my soul. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young assistant entered with a tray of tea and cookies. As she set it down, May noticed how she smiled warmly at Eleanor, not with the forced politeness often shown to wealthy clients, but with genuine affection. Thank you, Lily, Eleanor said. After the assistant left, Eleanor poured tea for them both. When I was homeless, I learned who people truly are by how they treat those they think can do nothing for them in return. She handed May a cup. You passed that test with flying colors, my dear. May sipped her tea, thoughts swirling. What would I actually do as director of this foundation? Eleanor's face brightened. You'd help shape our mission, decide which services to offer, hire staff who truly care, work directly with the people we serve. She leaned forward. We'd start small, but I have connections with potential donors. Once they see what we're building, I believe they'll support us. As Eleanor outlined her vision, May found herself nodding along. It was as if Eleanor had looked into her heart and found a dream May hadn't even known was there. "I still can't believe this is happening," May admitted. "Last week I was worrying about how to pay my mother's medical bills, and now." "Life can change in an instant," Eleanor said, her eyes twinkling. "Sometimes because of a simple act of kindness." Outside the window, the city lights began to twinkle as dusk fell. On the street below, people hurried home, lost in their own worlds. Few looked up to see the two women in the tower above, planning to change countless lives with something as simple as warm hands and warm hearts. 2 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. The old brick building on Pine Street that had once stood empty now buzzed with life. Fresh paint brightened its walls, and large windows let in streams of sunlight. A wooden sign over the entrance read, "Warm Hands, Warm Hearts Foundation," with Wyland Center for Women in small letters below. Inside, May walked through the bustling main hall, greeting staff and visitors with a warm smile. Women of all ages filled the space, some taking computer classes, others meeting with job counselors, some simply enjoying a hot meal in the cafeteria. Each face told a different story, but they shared the same look of hope that had once been missing from their eyes. "Ms. Lin," called a familiar voice. May turned to see Zach, now a 5th grader and a regular volunteer after school. "I finished setting up the children's corner like you asked." "Thank you," May said, ruffling his hair. "You're becoming our most reliable helper." In her office, May found Eleanor reviewing donation reports. At 72, Eleanor looked years younger than when they'd first met. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and she wore a simple but elegant outfit that suited her renewed status. Around her neck, protected in a special fabric cover but still worn daily, was Me's blue scarf, now something of a good luck charm for the foundation. "Good news," Eleanor announced as May entered. "The city approved our proposal. We can open the second center in Westside next month." Me's face lit up. "That's wonderful. 3 centers in 3 different neighborhoods, just like we dreamed." What had started as a single building had grown beyond their expectations. The foundation now operated in 3 cities with plans for more. They'd helped hundreds of women find jobs, secure permanent housing, and regain their dignity. For many, the foundation was the first place they'd been treated with respect after years of being invisible on the streets. "The film crew is coming at noon," Eleanor reminded her. "Are you ready?" Mee nodded, though butterflies danced in her stomach. A documentary filmmaker had approached them 6 months ago, fascinated by their story. What began as a simple interview had grown into a full-length film about homelessness, second chances, and how small acts of kindness could change lives. "I still can't believe people want to hear about us," May said, straightening papers on her desk. Elena smiled knowingly. "People need stories of hope, especially these days." The documentary had already generated interest from major networks. Early screenings had moved audiences to tears and to action. Donations poured in from viewers touched by the story of a teacher who gave away her scarf and the homeless woman who turned out to be so much more. At noon, the main hall was transformed into a temporary studio. Chairs were arranged for an audience of staff, volunteers, and women who had found new beginnings through the foundation. The filmmaker, a quiet woman named Tanya, directed her crew with gentle efficiency. "We'll do the joint interview first," she explained. "Then we'd like to film you both walking through the center, interacting naturally." Under the lights, Mee and Elena sat side by side, the blue scarf visible between them. Looking back, Tanya asked, "Did either of you imagine that a simple scarf would lead to all this?" Mee and Elena exchanged glances, a world of understanding passing between them. "The scarf was just the beginning," May said. "What really changed things was seeing each other, truly seeing each other, when the rest of the world looked away." Elena nodded, touching the scarf gently. "We like to tell the women who come here that everyone has value, everyone deserves kindness. Sometimes they don't believe us at first." Her eyes twinkled. "But we're very convincing." After the interview, Mee's mother joined them. Wai Lin, now cancer-free for 18 months, volunteered daily at the center that bore her name. The 3 women stood together as Tanya's camera captured their image, 3 generations united by common purpose. That evening, as the center quieted for the night, May found Eleanor in the garden out back. She was talking softly to a newly arrived young woman who clutched a worn backpack to her chest, eyes downcast. "This is May," Eleanor was saying. "She once gave a scarf to a homeless woman, and that changed everything." The young woman looked up, worriness giving way to the faintest spark of hope. May smiled and held out her hand. "Welcome," she said. "Let's see what we can change for you."